The moment I stepped through the doors, they saw me. My stepmother's smile tightened, my father's jaw clenched. And Brandon? He smirked like I'd just wandered in from a failed life. "Look what the wind dragged back," Linda muttered, loud enough for the staff to hear. I hadn't been home in 7 years. Not since the day my father told me I was no longer part of this family for turning down his business plan and walking into federal service instead. Now, here I was, standing in the marble entryway of the Carter estate, dressed in black, carrying nothing but a small clutch that held my NSA credentials and a letter of federal assignment. But they didn't ask why I'd returned. They didn't ask how I'd been. They handed me a tray of champagne flutes. "Since you're here," Linda said flatly, "make yourself useful." And I smiled. Because they had no idea what was coming. The tray was heavier than it looked. Not because of the champagne flutes, but because of the eyes, dozens of them watching, measuring, judging, some curious, some amused, some openly smug. I hadn't been inside the Carter estate since I was 23. Back then, I was the golden child valedictorian, debate team captain, early admission to Wharton. Back then, they called me brilliant. That ended the day I told my father I was turning down his carefully laid out MBA pipeline to accept a classified position in federal cyber intelligence. The silence was instant. The shame, unforgiving. By nightfall, I was packing my bags. The next morning, the locks were changed. So yes, holding a tray tonight was poetic. "Keep your shoulders back," Linda whispered as she brushed past me. "At least try to look like you haven't completely wasted your potential." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I had nothing to prove to her anymore. The guests filtered in slowly, men in crisp suits with navy and maroon ties, women in sequin gowns that cost more than my first clearance badge. They all mingled under the chandelier, sipping wine and marveling at the scale model of Carter Tech's upcoming joint defense project displayed in the center of the grand hall. Brandon stood near it, charming as ever. 30, handsome in the least interesting way, born with every door wide open. He had followed the script perfectly: business school, Carter Tech internship, fast-tracked promotions under Dad's watchful eye. Tonight, he was being introduced to investors as the future of the company. As if that future didn't depend on a contract I had the authority to kill. "Excuse me, miss." A man in a tux waved his empty glass at me like I was a vending machine. I took it, replaced it silently, and smiled. He didn't recognize me. Most didn't. But the ones who did, the family friends, the former colleagues, the country club crowd, they didn't offer hugs or welcomes. They offered whispered gossip. "She joined the government or something, right? I heard she flunked out of grad school." "No, I think she went off-grid. Conspiracy types, you know?" I passed by the dining room, where a trio of aunts were already discussing my outfit. "At least she's dressed modestly," one murmured. "She always was the serious one," another said, as if that were a sin. Poor Charles. So much potential just wasted. I let it all roll off me. Because I wasn't here for them. I was here for the audit. The Carter Tech Blackstone Global Partnership was one of the largest active cyber defense contracts currently pending final authorization. That authorization would come from my agency, and ultimately, from me. I'd been reviewing their architecture for 3 months under a code name. Tonight, I was doing a rare unannounced site visit to observe operational integrity. Normally, I would have approached this with a badge, a briefing, and a secured office. But not this time. This time, I wanted to see how they behaved when they thought I was nothing. A tall man in his 50s stepped into the room. Gray suit, piercing eyes, posture like a war general. The energy shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence. This was him, Richard Baines, CEO of Blackstone Global. My father rushed toward him with the practiced enthusiasm of a man eager to impress. "Richard!" Charles beamed. "An honor to have you here. Let me introduce my son, Brandon Carter, our lead strategist on the Aegis interface." Baines nodded politely, shaking Brandon's hand. "I've heard the name, looking forward to the presentation." And then his gaze shifted. Across the room. To me. His eyes narrowed, brows lifted, then his expression broke into a quiet smile of disbelief. I knew that look. He recognized me. He began moving through the crowd, past the hors d'oeuvres, ignoring my father entirely. Agent Carter, he said, voice low but clear. Didn't realize you'd be here in person. My stepmother stiffened beside me. My father blinked like someone just rewrote the script he'd spent years perfecting. Richard, he said slowly. Did you just say, Agent? Baines extended his hand toward Minot to take the tray, but to shake mine. I've read your briefings. Brilliant work on the Geneva Breach Protocol. Your counter-honeypot model inspired some changes in our own firewalls. I smiled calmly. Appreciate that, sir. I thought I'd make an in-person appearance before tomorrow's audit. Consider it a surprise inspection. He laughed warmly. A damn effective one. By now, the room had gone almost silent. Eyes widened. Mouths parted slightly. Someone dropped a fork. My father's face had turned from pride to confusion to dawning horror. Linda clutched her champagne glass like it might save her from drowning. Jade, he said slowly, voice cracking. You're the federal agent they sent? Yes, I said. Technically, I'm the one deciding whether Carter Tech moves forward with the contract. But tonight, I'm just here to enjoy the party. I handed the tray to a nearby staffer and stepped forward, letting the spotlight fall where it always should have been. Not behind the tray. Not beneath the shame, but exactly where I stood, eye level, unflinching, undeniable. Game on. They didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Not my father. Not Linda. Not Brandon. After the moment, Richard Baines called me Agent Carter. It was like someone detonated a silence grenade in the middle of the party. People whispered. They stared. Some looked impressed. Others looked downright uncomfortable, like they were suddenly afraid to say the wrong thing in front of me. I didn't mind. Fear, I'd learned, was often a more useful reaction than approval. I drifted away from the guests and stood near the fireplace, letting the low hum of strings from the quartet drown out the storm building behind my eyes. That moment, my father's face, frozen in confusion, Linda's champagne glass trembling just slightly in her hand, it should have felt like victory. But it didn't. Because behind the quiet satisfaction was something raw, a scar that hadn't closed, a voice that still echoed. If you walk away from this, Jade, you're no longer my daughter. I was 23. Graduated early from Penn, top of my class in applied mathematics. I had 3 internship offers at Fortune 500 firms, 2 Ivy League MBA acceptances, and a seat already reserved next to Brandon at Carter Tech. It was all mapped out. Not for me, but for the version of me my father had built like a corporate resume. Then came the NSA letter. A recruiter had approached me quietly after a university cybersecurity showcase. They'd seen my algorithm work, my capstone project on breach detection using behavioral AI. I passed 3 background checks, 4 interviews, and was offered a place in a rotational ops team. I said yes. My father said nothing at first, just silence, followed by a scotch, followed by a single sentence. You're making a very expensive mistake. I tried to explain, tried to tell him that I wanted my own path, that public service meant something to me, that I wasn't running from responsibility, I was running toward impact. He didn't care. You want to be a spy in a basement? He spat. You think this is noble? It's pathetic. It's for people who can't handle the real world. Linda piled on, like she always did. She's just doing this for attention. Maybe if we hadn't praised Brandon so much, she wouldn't need to sabotage her life. They argued for hours. Then came the ultimatum. You want to work for shadow people? Then be one. Get out of this house, Jade, and don't come back. I packed my things that night. No one said goodbye. Not even Brandon. He passed me in the hallway the next morning and shrugged. Guess not everyone's cut out for success. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat for 2 years. Took night shifts. Cleared endless security checkpoints. Got yelled at by supervisors who didn't care where I went to school. And I never looked back. Until tonight. A soft voice broke my thoughts. Agent Carter? It was one of the junior engineers from Blackstone. Nervous, mid-30s, wearing a tie that didn't quite match. I just wanted to say, your paper on adaptive intrusion monitoring? It changed the way we handle threat trees. I blinked, then smiled. I'm glad. Thanks. He left quickly, like speaking to me was something he had to gather courage for. I appreciated the gesture more than I let on. Just then, Brandon appeared. I could smell the cologne before I saw the contempt. He walked up with a half smile, the kind people wear when they don't know whether to laugh or panic. So, he said, you're the one holding our future in her hands. I didn't answer. I just raised an eyebrow. Funny, he continued. For someone who was so desperate to not be part of this family, you seem awfully comfortable being the one who might bring it down. There's a difference between destruction and accountability, I said calmly. Oh, please, he scoffed. This is personal. You've always had something to prove. No, I said. I've just always refused to prove it to the wrong people. His face twitched. I worked my ass off for this company, he snapped. Dad didn't just hand it to me. I didn't bother reminding him of the 5-figure allowance, the tailored internships, the hand-delivered board seats. I didn't have to. I hope you did work hard, I said simply, because starting tomorrow, I'm going to audit every line of code you signed off on. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. This contract, I continued, deals with national infrastructure, defense encryption, homeland systems. It's not a family project, Brandon. It's not a playground. If I find even one intentional vulnerability, the deal's off, and you'll be lucky to be left with your name on the door. He took a step back. I see. So this is revenge. No, I said softly. This is responsibility. Something you've never had to carry until now. I walked past him and didn't look back. The music had stopped. The guests were leaving. Somewhere behind me, my father was still frozen in the same conversation loop, trying to explain how his failure was now the woman holding the keys to his company's future. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Carter Tech not as the forgotten daughter, not as a traitor to the family brand, but as the agent of truth they never saw coming. And I wouldn't be carrying a tray this time. I arrived at Carter Tech at 7:48 the next morning. No grand entrance, no military convoy, just a federal vehicle with blackout windows, my NSA laptop bag, and a quiet ID scan at the front gate. The guard recognized my clearance and stood up straighter. Good morning, Agent Carter. Just Jade, I replied. Let's keep it simple. The building was sleek glass walls, minimalist steel, a tasteful blend of arrogance and funding. I hadn't set foot in this place since I was a teenager, back when my father would bring me in to observe real leadership, back when I still believed I'd inherit all this one day. The receptionist stared when I walked in. Word had clearly spread. I'm here to begin the pre-audit review, I said. Show me to the systems access floor, and I'll take it from there. Do you want someone from the executive team to brief you? She stammered. I smiled. They'll catch up eventually. The elevator chimed softly as I arrived on floor 12. Systems security, infrastructure. This was the beating heart of Carter Tech, where the data lived, where code was deployed, where vulnerabilities could cost lives. It was also where I'd learned just how bad things had gotten under Brandon's leadership. A young engineer named Milo met me at the server room. He blinked when he saw my badge. You're her. I'm me, I replied. You're Milo. You've been the lead on endpoint containment for this contract? Yes. Good. Walk me through your structure, from base layer to red zone shielding. I want to see how the defense segmentation was implemented and where it fails. His eyebrows shot up. Fails? There's no such thing as flawless code, I said flatly. There's only code that hasn't been tested hard enough. Milo swallowed. Right. We entered the mainframe control center, and he started walking me through the environment, the central nodes, firewall clusters, internal routing protocols. His explanations were competent but not confident. A few times, I asked about redirect sequences, And he hesitated. You didn't build this from scratch, did you? I asked. No, he admitted. Most of it was pre-approved from the executive level. Brandon wanted it deployed fast, to match the partnership timeline. I blinked. He fast-tracked the encryption layers without final round security testing? Milo grimaced. I wasn't supposed to say that. I took a deep breath. So there it was. Corner cutting. The kind that looks efficient to investors, but dangerous to national security. How many people on this floor have full knowledge of the Red Zone's real-time signature behaviors? I asked. Milo frowned. Just me and Priya. But she transferred last week. I jotted the names down. Send me all the code commit logs for the last 4 weeks, and I want access to the sandbox logs. Yes, Agent. And one more thing. Milo lock Brandon Carter's admin access credentials as of now. I'll clear it later if needed. He blinked again. You want me to block the CEO? I turned to face him fully. I want you to follow Federal Security Compliance Protocol, which means no exec-level override access during active government audit periods. His eyes widened. Yes, ma'am. By 10/12, I'd already flagged 3 major vulnerabilities. Unsecured API routes connected directly to the core, without event throttling. Obsolete packet inspection filters, allowing for quiet breach signatures to bypass Layer 2 detection. A bizarre timestamp deletion mechanism in the sandbox logs, probably accidental, but possibly worse. Each one was enough to raise red flags at the Pentagon level. All 3 combined? Potential grounds for suspension of contract. I sat down at a terminal, logged into the audit interface, and opened a private report folder labeled CT AEGS, Liaison Review, Level Omega. That's where my real work would begin. An hour later, the door to the security floor hissed open. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Brandon. His voice carried that same forced calm as last night, like he was trying to sound in control, but couldn't shake the feeling he'd already lost it. Well, you've made yourself comfortable. I didn't stop typing. You made it easy. You locked me out of my own system. I followed federal audit protocol. You would have known that if you read the compliance terms you signed. He walked closer. You're not really going to tank this deal over a few bugs, are you? I turned. Brandon, this isn't about bugs. This is about an infrastructure that, under your direction, was launched prematurely, without red team penetration, and with full client access overlays still active in test mode. You handed a loaded weapon to a defense client and hoped they wouldn't pull the trigger. His face paled. That's dramatic. No, I said. That's forensic. He tried to regroup. Okay, look, I made aggressive calls. That's how innovation works. You said it yourself, no system is flawless. So audit it, fix it, but don't bury us. I stared at him. And for a moment, I saw it. The panic underneath the charm. The fear that maybe he really wasn't built for this. That maybe Daddy's plan had gone too far. I don't want to bury Carter Tech, I said quietly. But I won't let it bury a national defense system either. This isn't your internship, Brandon. This is real. He said nothing, just turned and left. And I went back to work. Because unlike them, I wasn't here to save face. I was here to save something far more important. The conference room at Carter Tech was all glass, steel, and ego. Long mahogany table, 12 leather chairs on each side, a full-length wall screen ready for Brandon's big pitch, bottled water lined up like little soldiers, everything polished, everything prepared, everything perfect. Except the code. I sat at the far end of the table, government seat, neutral badge, black blazer, no logo. No one offered me coffee. No one asked if I needed anything. They all knew who I was now, but didn't know what I would do. I liked that. The uncertainty was leverage. Brandon entered 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 assistants who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. He gave me a tight smile, then scanned the room like he owned it. The confidence was still there, but it was nervous now, hollow around the edges. My father came in behind him. Charles Carter. Suit immaculate. Posture perfect, expression unreadable. He hadn't said a word to me since last night. He didn't need to. The tension said it all. You came back to humiliate us. No. I came back to protect something bigger than you. But if humiliation came as a side effect, so be it. The final attendee stepped in, Richard Baines, CEO of Blackstone Global. The room shifted as soon as he entered. Everyone straightened. My father stood. Richard, welcome, he greeted with practiced charm. Baines gave a nod, then turned to me. Agent Carter, he said clearly, good to see you again. I trust your team is satisfied with the early findings? I nodded. We've begun our review. I'll present a preliminary security brief after Brandon's demonstration. My father blinked, barely hiding his confusion. You're speaking in this meeting? Baines raised an eyebrow. She's the lead liaison, Charles. She has full audit authority. You were notified of that, weren't you? Yes. I just didn't realize she'd be. He trailed off, but the room heard everything he didn't say. Didn't realize she'd be someone. The meeting began. Brandon launched into his pitch with all the energy of a man pretending not to be cornered. Slides flashed across the screen, charts, forecasts, interface mock-ups. He spoke about innovation, market impact, defense potential. I listened carefully, even took notes. But I also watched how his voice trembled ever so slightly every time I raised my pen. Watched my father glance at me from across the table, like I might pull the pin from a grenade. I waited until Brandon finished his final slide. And with these updates, he said, Carter Tech is ready to fully deploy Phase 1 of the Aegis interface in conjunction with Blackstone's existing encryption architecture. Polite applause followed, the kind people give before the real show begins. Then Baines turned to me. Agent Carter, your thoughts? I stood, plugged in my laptop. The screen shifted from Brandon's sleek visuals to a stark black background with a government seal. No music, no animation. Just facts. Over the past 48 hours, I began, my team and I conducted a Level Omega protocol review of Carter Tech's back-end infrastructure. We examined firewall integrity, endpoint security, sandbox behavior, and protocol continuity under duress simulations. A pause. In that time we found 3 red vulnerabilities. Any one of them would have disqualified this partnership under federal contract law. All 3 combined suggest a failure in executive oversight and deployment timing. The silence was instant. Even the projector seemed to go quieter. My father's knuckles whitened on the table. Brandon's jaw clenched. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. Unthrottled access pipeline breach time, 14.3 seconds. Slide 2. Obsolete inspection layer failure rate, 61%. Slide 3. Sandbox log, wipe inconsistency forensic traceability, 0. These flaws, I said calmly, could allow a mid-level adversary to infiltrate national defense protocols through your system. It wouldn't even take a nation-state actor. A college hacker with enough persistence could compromise live defense data feeds. Baines looked grim. One of his VPs swore under his breath. Brandon tried to speak. These are temporary bugs. They've existed for 3 full production cycles, I cut in, and you launched the prototype anyway. My voice didn't rise. I didn't have to shout. The data spoke louder than anything. My father cleared his throat. Agent Carter, surely. Ms. Carter, I corrected, is fine. He froze. I clicked again. Next slide. Access logs Brandon Carter. Override on safety protocols. Timestamped. The room went still. Brandon's face drained of color. 2 didn't disable safety. I expedited integration. Without penetration clearance, I said. You greenlit an unstable interface for use in a military-adjacent system. That's not innovation, that's negligence. I turned to Baines. Given the findings, we're recommending conditional freeze of integration until Carter Tech restructures oversight and completes third-party validation. Brandon stood. You're tanking my career. I faced him fully. You're lucky you still have one. Baines finally spoke. I support the freeze. My father shot up. Richard, surely we can talk about this. He raised a hand. This isn't a negotiation, Charles. She's right. I've read her work for years. Hell, I've implemented her countermeasures in my own infrastructure. If Jade says this system isn't ready, then it isn't. He looked at me. Your recommendation stands, Agent Carter. We'll await your final report. I nodded. The meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped. Executives scattered. The only people left in the room were me, Brandon, and my father. Charles looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as a disappointment. Not as a lost cause. But as something he never saw coming. You're this powerful? I didn't smile. I didn't come back to be powerful, Dad. I came back to protect what matters, even if that means protecting it from you. And then I walked out. I found the study exactly where I remembered it. Second floor, left hallway, the door with the brass lion handle. As a child, I used to believe that handle guarded secrets. Now I knew it merely guarded silence. The kind that festers over years and pretends to be peace. I didn't knock. My father looked up from the leather armchair. Linda was seated across from him, legs crossed, her wine glass dangerously tilted even though it was barely noon. Brandon wasn't there, which was exactly how I wanted it. Close the door, my father said. I did. For a moment, none of us spoke. Just the tick of the grandfather clock, like a countdown. Then he finally broke the silence. You embarrassed me, Jade. No, I replied. You embarrassed yourself. I just turned the lights on. Linda scoffed, swirling her wine. You think this is justice? Humiliating your own brother? After everything we gave you? I laughed quietly. The kind that comes from old scars, not amusement. You gave me conditions, not love. There's a difference. My father stood. His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. You were the one who walked away. No, I said. I was the one you pushed out, because I wouldn't follow your blueprint, because I didn't want to be a puppet at Carter Tech or Brandon's understudy. You think that gives you the right to come back and act like judge and executioner? I walked slowly to the desk, placed both palms flat on the mahogany. I didn't come to punish, I said. But I also didn't come to apologize for becoming someone you didn't expect. Linda stood now too. You were always dramatic, always had to prove how special you were. You just couldn't be normal. Normal, I echoed. You mean obedient? She stepped closer. You think you're better than us now? Because some CEO praised your little intelligence project? I turned to her fully. You mean the National Encryption Directive I wrote that protected U.S. infrastructure during the Atlantic breach? That project? She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. My father sat back down slowly. I never hated your intelligence, he said, almost quiet. I just hated how you used it to drift away. That stopped me for just a breath. Then I answered, softer. I didn't drift. You pushed. Every time I asked to pursue something outside the family brand, you shut it down. Every time I showed I was more than just a Carter Tech cog, you made it clear I was inconvenient. He didn't deny it. I never wanted to leave this family, I added, but I wasn't going to shrink just to fit back into your picture. He looked down at his hands. Brandon wasn't ready, and now the world knows. Then maybe the world deserved to know. Linda scoffed again, but she didn't speak this time. Her silence was more brittle than her words. I turned toward the door, then paused. There's something else. My father looked up again. I'm recommending you replace Brandon as project lead. Not with me, I'm not staying, but with someone who earned it. His brow furrowed. You want us to demote your brother? I want you to protect your legacy, because right now, it's hanging by a thread. His voice was tired when he spoke next. And what about you? What do you want? I looked back one last time. I wanted a father who believed in who I was, not who he planned. Then I walked away. The sun was slipping behind the Carter Tech building when I stepped outside. The lot was nearly empty, save for a few lingering executives and black sedans. The wind was cold, clean. It reminded me I'd been breathing stale air inside that family too long. I reached my car, then heard footsteps behind me. Brandon. No jacket, just a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows like he was trying to look calm, but his eyes betrayed him. Running back to DC already? He asked, arms crossed. I'm not running anywhere, I said, unlocking the door. But I'm done here. He leaned against the adjacent car, not looking at me. So that's it? You blow it all up? And walk away like some savior? No, I said. I walk away like someone who did her job. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. You really think I never tried? That caught me off guard. Tried? To live up to him, to be what he wanted. You think he handed me this place on a silver platter? He let out a bitter laugh. No, he handed me a blueprint I couldn't change. Every mistake I made was compared to you even after you were gone. I frowned. That's not what it looked like. Of course not. You were out there saving the world. I was in here trying not to break it. I leaned against my own car now, folding my arms. So why didn't you say something? Because if I said I wasn't ready, he'd see me as weak. And if I admitted you were better, he'd cut me out. And instead, you let the company nearly walk into federal suspension? He winced. I didn't see how bad it got, he said. Until you showed up. I thought I had it under control. I thought, maybe if I pulled it off, he'd finally stop talking about you like some lost myth. That stung more than I expected. You were never supposed to compete with me, Brandon, I said, softer now. We weren't supposed to be pitted against each other. He looked at me then fully. For the first time in years, maybe. You really loved this place too, didn't you? I did, I said. Before they made me choose between it and myself. Silence again. Then he asked, Are you going to report me for the override? I shook my head. The report already includes it. But I didn't call for criminal referral, just replacement and oversight. He looked surprised, maybe even relieved. I'm not here to destroy you, I added, but I won't protect your shortcuts either. He nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time I stopped taking them. I opened my car door. Don't waste the second chance, Brandon, I said. You won't get another one. He didn't follow me, didn't beg or argue. Just stood there, arms crossed, watching me go. And for once, he looked like a man who'd finally stopped pretending. The flight back to DC was short, but the silence felt longer. I didn't replay the confrontation with my father. Or the meeting. Or even Brandon's eyes in the parking lot. I kept thinking about one thing. How close I came to becoming just like them. The power. The pride. The silence. I closed my eyes, but before I could drift, my phone vibrated. A message. Richard Baines would like to meet privately. 5 p.m., M Street office, confidential. By 4:55 p.m., I was seated in a glass-walled executive suite overlooking the Potomac. Richard Baines sat across from me, jacket off, tie loosened, the kind of posture that said, "This isn't about business anymore." "Thank you for coming," he said, pouring tea instead of coffee. I noticed. It was intentional. "You said confidential," I replied. He smiled. "Always, but especially for you." I raised an eyebrow. He leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Jade. Do you remember your first publication? The paper on decentralized response firewalls?" I blinked. "I wrote that in grad school. Before I was even cleared." "I read it," he said. "Twice. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because it wasn't written to impress. It was written to protect." He sipped his tea, then continued. "Even back then, I could see something most people missed. You weren't trying to be the smartest in the room. You were trying to be the one who kept the room safe, even if no one thanked you." I said nothing. He went on, quieter now. "Your father is a brilliant strategist. Your brother is an ambitious one. But you..." He paused. "You're a guardian. You don't make noise for recognition. You make impact for results. That's why I requested your assignment." I looked up, surprised. "You pulled my name?" He nodded. When I saw Carter Tech on the defense contract list, I knew it would be a conflict. So I asked them to send the one person who wouldn't flinch, who didn't owe anyone in that building a damn thing. The weight of that settled into the silence. And I wasn't wrong, he added. For the first time in years I felt seen. Not as a daughter, not as a rival, not as an agent with a badge and a mandate, but as Jade, the woman I became when no one was watching. So what happens now? I asked. He shrugged. You file your final report. Someone else will implement your recommendations. Brandon will either rise or fall by what he chooses next. And my family? That's not my jurisdiction, he said. But I'll tell you this. They know now, even if they don't admit it. I exhaled slowly. Not satisfaction. Not closure. Just air I'd been holding since I was 21. He stood, offering his hand. I shook it. As I turned to go, he said one last thing. You didn't come back for revenge. That's why it worked. And in that moment, I understood. Power wasn't showing them who I'd become. It was becoming her even when no one believed I could. I unpacked slowly. Not because I had a lot, 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, but because I wasn't in a hurry anymore. The studio apartment wasn't much, just enough. One living space, a worn blue couch, shelves filled with books I'd carried across state lines, and a little balcony that overlooked a quiet stretch of Georgetown rooftops. I set down my mug of chamomile tea and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, but they didn't demand attention the way the Carter estate had. These lights whispered. They shimmered without screaming. They reminded me that not everything valuable has to shine the loudest. It had been 4 days since the audit. 3 days since I filed the final report. 2 days since I deleted the last message from my father, a voicemail that started strong and ended in silence. And exactly 1 day since I realized I wasn't angry anymore. That night, I made dinner, just for myself. No caterers, no banquet tables, no seating charts. Pasta with basil, a glass of red wine. Miles Davis playing low from my phone. Halfway through the meal, someone knocked. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never expected anyone. I opened the door cautiously. A young woman stood there, maybe 22. Dark-rimmed glasses, a government ID around her neck, and a manila folder clutched to her chest like it was her security blanket. Agent Carter? She asked. I smiled. Technically, yes, but it's just Jade here. She flushed. Sorry. I'm from the DC Cybersecurity Fellowship. I was told to deliver this to you personally. I took the folder. It had my name on it. Inside, a formal letter of invitation. We would be honored if you would serve as a lead mentor and program designer for our National Youth Encryption Initiative. I read the first paragraph, then the second. Then I laughed gently. Of course. She looked nervous. Is it not the right time? I shook my head. It's perfect. I just didn't expect to be seen this way so soon. Her shoulders relaxed. I read your Geneva paper. It's why I joined this track. You made me feel like people like us belonged here. That hit harder than I expected. Not because of the flattery, but because I saw myself in her. In the way she clutched that folder like it was armor. The way she stood on my doorstep, unsure if she was welcome. I stepped aside. Come in, I said. You shouldn't be walking around DC with classified mail and no tea. She smiled, stepping into the apartment. An hour later, after she'd left folder delivered, conversation had, and nerves soothed, I sat back down by the window. There was no fanfare, no applause, no headline declaring I'd won. And yet I felt full. Not just of food. Of breath, of space, of possibility. I thought about Brandon, about whether he would rise or retreat. I thought about my father. Whether he was finally learning that love cannot be conditional and still be called love. And I thought about Linda, though, only for a moment. Then I picked up the pen on my side table and opened a blank page in my journal. At the top I wrote, I did not come back to reclaim the house. I came back to reclaim myself. And I did. Then I closed the book. Tomorrow, there would be new work. New minds to mentor. New ways to guard, without hiding. But tonight I let myself be still. No titles. No codes. Just Jade.